Welcome back to Put the Metal On. My name is Dave Cullen. We're back once more for a metal music review. For today's video, we're going to be talking about the 10th studio album from Italian metal band Lacuna Coil called Sleepless Empire that was released on St. Valentine's Day, February 14th of this year, which showcases the band's evolution while staying true to their Gothic metal roots. Before we talk about that album itself, let's talk about Lacuna Coil heading up to the album Sleepless Empire, starting with their artistic evolution and sound developments. So Lacuna Coil have always been a band in motion, never content with simply repeating themselves. Their early work, such as in Reverie and Unleashed Moments, leaned heavily towards Gothic rock influences with a melancholic yet melodic approach, reminiscent of The Gathering or early Within Temptation. However, their breakout moment came with Comalize, released in 2002, an album that seamlessly blended Gothic atmosphere with radio-friendly accessibility. Then following the success of Comalize came their 2006 release Karma Code, which pushed them further into the mainstream, incorporating nu metal influences and a heavier groove-oriented sound. And while this divided some long-term fans, it also expanded their audience significantly. However, in the late 2000s and early 2010s, this saw the band experimenting into a more modern, streamlined sound, sometimes at the expense of their darker, more gothic roots. Albums later on, such as Shallow Life from 2009 and Dark Adrenaline from 2012, leaned into a polished alternative metal aesthetic with mixed reception. And while the album contained some very strong individual songs, some critics and fans felt that the band were chasing trends rather than settling into them. However, this tide once more shifted again with their 2014 released Broken Crown Halo and their 2016 released Delirium. The latter saw Lacuna Coil reintroducing their heavier, almost metalcore inspired approach. Delirium was the first album for Lacuna Coil without their long-term drummer Cristiano Mazzatti and guitarist Marco Biazzi, marking a turning point in both the band's lineup and creative dynamic. But then came their 2019 release Black Anima, arguably their strongest work in years, an album that embraced a raw, more aggressive sound while maintaining the melodic sensibilities that define Lacuna Coil. Thematically, it was a deeply personal album exploring grief, loss, and inner demons. It resounded strongly with some fans and critics alike, proving that the band still had fresh ideas to offer. Now, unlike many of their peers, Lacuna Coil did manage to maintain a relatively stable core lineup, with Cristina, Scabbia, and Andrea Ferro being the band's creative pillars. However, the departure of Carissa Muiz in 2014 did leave a very notable gap, leaving the remaining members to really rethink their approach. Enter Richard Mies on drums and Diego Cavallotti on guitar, both of whom injected new energy to the band's sound. Mies in particular brought a more modern and aggressive drumming style, which complemented the heavier direction of Delirium and Black Anima. Despite the lineup shifts though, the chemistry between Scabbia and Ferro remains the band's foundation. Their dual vocal dynamic has always been a defining feature of the band, and while some critics feel that Ferro's harsh vocals has limitations, he provides a necessary contrast to Scabbia's soaring melodies. By the time the mid-2010s entered, the rock and metal scene had evolved significantly. Symphonic and Gothic metal, once dominant in the early 2000s, had given way to more modern metalcore and gist-influenced sounds. Even bands like Within Temptation and Nightwish adapted by incorporating more cinematic and orchestral elements, while Evanescence leaned more to rock-pop territory. Lacuna Coil, on the other hand, found themselves in a very interesting position. They were too heavy to be considered purely commercial rock, but at the same time they weren't extreme enough to fit in the rising wave of modern metal acts. But instead of radically altering their identity like their peers, they instead decided to double down on a darker, heavier aesthetic while still maintaining accessibility, something that serves them well in Black Anima. By 2023, Lacuna Coil have a very loyal fan base, but it still comes with a challenge: how to keep evolving without alienating their core audience. While some long-term fans still longed for the melancholic elegance of their early work, others embraced the more aggressive modern metal elements as well. Their 2022 release Comalize 20, a reimagined version of Comalize, offered a glimpse of how they can reinterpret their past while keeping things fresh. And while it was very well received overall, it also raised expectations of what would come next. Therefore, leading into the recording of Sleepless Empire, Lacuna Coil find themselves in several factors working in their favour. They have a proven ability to reinvent themselves. They already successfully transitioned into multiple sonic shifts from global metal to alternative metal to modern heaviness. Their live performances still remain a huge asset, with Scabbia in particular, her charisma, and Ferro's energy making them one of the more engaging live acts in the genre. Plus, the success of their most previous albums, particularly Black Anima, has given them very much creative momentum. But at the same time, there's still challenges. While Black Anima was indeed a success, would they continue in the same vein or begin to take new risks? Also, with Gothic and alternative metal seeing waves from newer bands, could Lacuna Coil stand out from these other bands too? You also have to consider the balance between nostalgia and progress. Would they embrace their older Gothic-leaning sound again, or continue down the heavier modern paths? Ultimately, Sleepless Empire has the potential to be a defining statement. Either it could be a continuation of the modern metal evolution, or a reinvention that blends both their past and their future. So Lacuna Coil entering the Sleepless Empire era as veterans of the metal scene with nothing else to prove, yet they still have something to say. Their ability to endure through shifting trends and industry changes really speaks highly of their resilience and passion. The question isn't whether they can make a solid album or not, it's whether they can push themselves into new creative territory. In the years leading up to Sleepless Empire, they have already proven their adaptability. The challenge was not to remain irrelevant, it was more to craft something that could rival their strongest works. With the foundation of Black Anima, they definitely have momentum. The only question is whether they could take the next step forward, or would they continue to play safe? Well, let's find out by talking about the album itself. First of all, talking about the overall composition and cohesion. So the album has a genuinely smooth flow, with strong and closing tracks that bookend the experience effectively. But at the same time, the pacing of the middle section, I thought, feels a bit uneven, with some songs blending together rather than standing apart. The track listing, I felt, could have been arranged slightly better to create a more dynamic progression. Lacuna Coil have definitely continued their gothic metal sound with more of a modern edge, and while there's enough variation in moods and tempo, some tracks feel like they follow a certain formula. And while there are definitely moments where the band experiments with electronic textures and heavier breakdowns, these choices aren't always fully developed, I feel. The inclusion of interludes and atmospheric intros is a nice touch, but not all of them feel essential. I feel some of them do feel natural, but others come off as almost filler rather than integral parts of the album's journey. And at 46 minutes, it doesn't overstay its welcome at all, but it doesn't have a strong impression of a complete cohesive narrative for me. I feel some tracks could have been trimmed and reworked a bit better just to retain or maintain that momentum a little bit better. Now let's talk about the songwriting and arrangements. There's definitely standout tracks such as Gravity and I Wish You Were Dead, which have very strong hooks. But there's other songs that I don't feel have the same level of catchiness, making some of the parts of the album less memorable after multiple listens. The band definitely balances simplicity with more layered compositions, but a few tracks also rely maybe too heavily on repetitive structures. And while this does make the songs more accessible, it also makes them feel too predictable at the same time. I feel it could have benefited a lot more with some unexpected shifts or progressive elements in some cases. The band successfully conveys a melancholic and aggressive tone, but not all the tracks I feel hit the emotional high and lows it seems to aim for. It's the darker and more atmospheric moments is definitely where the band truly shines, but some of the heavier moments I also feel are a bit less inspired as well. Lyrics are very interesting. They explore themes of isolation, technology's grip on society, and some personal turmoil. All very relatable, especially in this day and age. And while this aligns well with the band's gothic aesthetic, some lyrical ideas feel a bit surface leveled and could have been pushed further for deeper impact, I felt. Now let's talk about the performance and musicianship. Musicianship is very tight, very strong performances from all members. The guitars in particular deliver powerful, chugging riffs, and the rhythm section provide a very solid backbone. However, I do feel there are moments where the instrumental arrangements feel a bit restrained, as if the band are holding back to truly push their technical abilities, which I can't really understand. The band strikes a good balance of technical proficiency and emotion. It isn't too robotic, but at times the performances do feel slightly too polished as well, lacking a raw, organic feel that could have elevated certain moments. That's sort of the disadvantage when it comes to production or playability sometimes. Cristina Scabbia once again proves why she's one of the most compelling vocalists in the genre, with her soughing cleans providing a striking contrast to Ferro's growls. Having said that, some of Andrea's harsher vocals feel a lot less dynamic than previous albums, I thought, occasionally sounding monotone rather than emotionally varied. The drum and bass hold everything together very well, though I do find sometimes the bass, and I can't stand saying this, is lost in the mix sometimes. The drum patterns to make up for this are effective, but they don't always take risks either. They stick to more standard grooves that work but don't necessarily surprise. Now let's move on to the production and sound quality. The production is very polished, everything is very audible, you can hear everything for the most part, but I also feel in some tracks the vocals are slightly too forward in the mix, sort of overshadowing the instrumentation. This is where a more balanced approach would have been preferred, it would allow the music to breathe more. As I said, the guitars have a well-produced thick tone that suit the band's sounds, and while the bass, as I mentioned, is present, it doesn't always stand out as much as it should, often getting buried under the guitars and synths, and again, I can't tell you how much of a tragedy that is. The drums for the most part are very punchy, very well recorded, though they sometimes feel slightly overproduced. A more natural live feel could have really done the trick here. Cristina's vocals are given the most prominence, and for obvious reason, it makes sense given her role, but Andrea's growls sometimes feel slightly detached from the mix, rather than blending seamlessly with the music. In terms of the effects, I feel the use of the synths and atmospheric effects really adds some good depth to the album. At the same time, I feel it's more of an afterthought than an essential part of the composition. If it was a bit more of an intrigued approach, I feel it really could have strengthened the overall atmosphere. Now let's move on to the creativity and originality. So there's no question, Sleepless Empire is unmistakably Lacuna Coil, but at the same time I don't feel it breaks new ground for them. While it refines their established sound, it doesn't push any new boundaries for me in a way that makes them stand out from their past works. It balances more modern influences, sure, with their classic Gothic metal roots, but some moments I feel are too safe, as if they're leaning on familiar formulas rather than taking new risks. And while I do feel they hint in experimentation, especially with electronical and alternative metal elements, some of the ideas don't feel fully utilised. Again, it's like they're dipping their toe into the idea rather than diving headfirst. If they just took that approach, were a bit more bolder, by blending these elements, I feel it could have resulted in something way more unique. Which brings me on finally to our replay value and impact. The album definitely has a good amount of replay value for sure, especially for fans of Lacuna Coil's style, but at the same time, I do feel the album definitely loses its appeal over time because of their formulaic structures. Songs like Gravity, Hosting the Shadow, and I Wish You Were Dead are definitely highlights that the listeners will likely to revisit to, as they capture the stronger aspects of the band's songwriting and energy. And while the album will definitely resonate with Lacuna Coil's dedicated fan base and maintains a relevance in the Gothic metal scene for sure, it doesn't feel like a game changer to me either. It is a solid album, there's no question about that, but it doesn't leave a lasting impression in comparison to Common Lies or Black Animal like I spoke about earlier. So to finish, Lacuna Coil definitely deliver a solid, well-produced album with Sleepless Empire, but it plays things a little too safe for me as well. While there's definitely some great moments and very strong vocal performances and engaging songwriting, some parts still feel predictable for me. The album doesn't fully capitalize on the atmospheric potential. It's definitely a worthwhile listen for long-term fans, but those looking for a major evolution in their sounds will find this a bit underwhelming. I feel if Lacuna Coil took a bit more risks, whether it be bolder songwriting, deeper lyrical exploration, and more organic production, the album could have reached much greater heights. But that said, it's still a very enjoyable record. I still highly recommend it. While it may not redefine their career, it's a testament to their consistency and ability to craft as compelling Gothic metal as you'll find. So, definitely worth a listen for sure. And that's another metal music review, guys. Thank you so much as always for watching. If you liked today's video, please give it a like. If it's your first time checking us out here and Put the Metal On, please give us a subscribe for more metal music reviews and possibly more in the future. And what do you think yourself of the album? Do you agree or disagree with me? What are your favorite songs? What do you like about the album? Please let us know on the comments below. We'll be back very soon with some more metal music reviews. I hope you enjoyed today's video and we'll see you again soon. But until then, I've been Dave Cullen and this has been Put the Metal On. Stay safe and enjoy the metal.